Hi, welcome everyone. We are so excited to have you joining us today. We're really excited to share with you our thinking around how to create engaging students and engaging students in engaging lessons and learning. And a lot of this comes through student choice and student voice.
I'm Shannon Cunningham. I am currently a teacher over at the Black Diamond Elementary School. This year, through hybrid learning, I've started out with a 4-5 combination class and am now a 3-5 combination class, or 3-4 combination class. But this is my 16th year of teaching. I have about 7 years being a one-on-one teacher within the classroom and supporting my district through the blended learning team and supporting teachers in their journey to become blended learning teachers.
And I'm Jen Longmire. I am the K-12 instructional technology support teacher in the Enumclaw School District. So Shannon and I work really closely together. This is my 25th year in education. I can't believe it's been 25 years. Oh my gosh. But I really truly believe in that whole philosophy of blended learning. We've got to be creating engaging opportunities for our students digitally, but we also need to create engaging opportunities for our students non-digitally. And how do we best integrate the two together so that they are not standalone, but they truly work hand in hand to create richer, better experiences for us as teachers, and more importantly, for our students.
All right, so our work today is going to be broken up into manageable steps. We feel like 5 steps is manageable for all of us to learn. And we want to keep that in mind when we're teaching adults as well as teaching kids. So we've got 5 steps to creating engaging lessons that we're going to go through today, with the first one being coming up with a guiding question, and then setting some goals, developing resources, and then creating that structure, and finally analyzing or reflecting on the outcomes.
All right, so let's get started. Step 1 really is finding that guiding question or theme. What is that enduring learning that you want your students to have because of this opportunity you create for them? And when we think about today's students and the internet, everything is Googleable. Your knowledge, your content is completely Googleable. So if it's Googleable, that's not really where we want to focus our teaching on. We need to be creating experiences for our students to be able to think deeper based on what skills we want them to have, not necessarily what's the content knowledge.
All right, so one of the guiding questions that I use when I'm planning my lessons is, what do I want students to remember 10 years from now? Now, if you think back to when you were in school, what are some of the lessons that you remember? Do you remember that worksheet in math? Or do you remember conjugating verbs in French on that one worksheet? No, we remember things, although there was one worksheet I do remember, and it was in 5th grade. And I remember the teacher, it's the one where the teacher hands out the worksheet and says, read the entire page before you start. Well, if you read the first direction, it was like, put your name at the top. And most kiddos didn't read the whole thing. And so they have you up on the front of the room, clucking like a chicken and all these things. But I think when you get to the very end, all it says is, all you have to do is put your name at the top and sit quietly. So I do remember that worksheet. But other than that, the lessons that I remember from being in school was in my social studies class when we did a UN seminar where we all got broken up into different countries, and we sat around in a circle within the room, and we did that for weeks where we discussed things that would involve the UN, and that's how we learned the UN. I remember 4th grade, we got to do a marketplace where each student got to create a business. And then we exchanged ideas and we sold things to each other and we created things. Those are the kinds of lessons I remember. I don't remember the worksheets from my math class. So that's what we want to keep in mind. And that's where we want to go with our lessons today. So the other key thing I think about is not only what is it do I want kids to know 10 years from now, but how can I make this personally relevant to them? So like one of the things I'm doing right now with my group, we just transitioned into hybrid learning a few weeks ago, and I have a new set of kids. So I'm taking this time to really get to know them. And what I did this week is send out an interest survey just to find out what is it they're passionate about, what is exciting to them, what kind of movies do they like to watch, what kind of books do they like to read, what do they do in their spare time, and what are they curious about. And then I use that information to kind of guide me in planning my lessons. So not only do I want to think about 10 years from now, but I want to connect that to them right now where they are and create lessons that feed that passion that they may have.
So now we want you to get actively involved with us. So over in the chat, we want you to think about, what do you want your students to remember 10 years from now? So we're going to set a timer for 1 minute, get into the chat, share your thinking, and then go read other people's thinking. Here we go. All right, thanks for sharing with us in the chat. So step 2 is really about setting your goals. Know where you're going and know, what do you want your students to be able to do at the end. So when we think about our goals, we need to think about it through 2 different lenses. First, what do we want students to consume? What are they going to use to learn? And we typically think usually it's a book or an article, but the world is so vast. There are so many things that our students can consume: cereal boxes, books, articles, videos, conversations, observations. Really, how our students can learn is limitless, and they have a lot of choice in how they can learn. And then once they have this knowledge, how do we want them to show us what they've learned? And if we create a system where everyone produces the exact same thing to show their learning, we really haven't given them any choice or voice. We've created a recipe for something that looks the same. And we want you to stretch your thinking a little bit about, how can you give students that empowerment to create and show you what they really know in their own way. And a lot of that comes down to choice. Every single one of our students is unique, and they're going to create a unique product for us if we give them the opportunity. And choice does not mean you have to have this amazing, huge, massive choice board. Choice can be 2 things. Would you rather read this book or listen to this podcast? Would you rather produce a video showing me what you know or write a paper? So you can start small, but really the power of this comes in giving students that choice, both over how they consume and gain their knowledge and how they show you what they know. And this all wraps into your standards. You will find out that oftentimes we will look at our standards, we'll figure out what standard we want to teach, and then we create something around that standard. But what we are suggesting is flip that on its head. Create this rich, engaging opportunity for your students. And after you've created the opportunity, and after you've created what you want students to engage in, go back to your standards and see what standards you've hit. We're willing to bet that you are going to actually have covered a lot more standards than if you start with the standard and create around that.
Well, and I was going to add to that, that when right now I'm creating a lesson where I really want kids to work on informational writing, but that's not where I started. I'm starting with their interests, and then I can, whatever they're producing, I can embed those standards within that. All right. So how much time are your students consuming versus creating? Where is the bulk of the learning happening? Is it during the creation phase or during the consuming phase? If I know myself as a learner, and actually I'm taking classes right now, and every time I'm reading a chapter, I'm having to do something with that information. We know through brain research that if it's not enough to just consume the information, you have to do something with it in order for you to retain that information. So what is it your kids are, when they're consuming, what do you have them creating afterwards so that they can retain that information? So what we're going to do is we're going to invite silence right now as our think partner, and we're going to give you 1 minute to think about how much time are your students consuming versus creating. Are you giving them those opportunities to do something with the information that they are consuming? So what we're going to do is we're going to set the timer. We're going to give you 1 minute of silent think time, and then we'll have a question afterwards. All right. I know sometimes that 1 minute can seem like forever and feel uncomfortable, but it's also a good reminder for us when we are teaching our lessons to provide that think time for our students as well, because I know it helps me to calm my thinking down a minute, gather my thoughts before then I can share what I'm thinking. All right, now that you've had some time to think through your consumption versus your creation, what we would like you to do is share some of your thoughts in the chat. So really what we want you to think about are, what is something your students could consume? What are some areas or places you could get some things to consume for your kids? And what is something they could create once they've consumed that information? So would you put that information in the chat, and hopefully we can learn from one another on consumption versus creation.
I am so loving this audience participation. This is fantastic. Thank you so much all for engaging in this.
Yes, yes. All right, so step 3 in this process of creating lessons where students are engaged through voice and choice would be to curate resources. This is the point in which you want to gather your materials. So, and think about what you're going to need to create these lessons. What kind of books do you need? What curriculum do you need? maybe you need to consult with your colleagues or have a conversation during a PLC time. Maybe you need to connect with your personal learning network. I know I have a Twitter personal learning network where I go out all the time and say, hey, I'm looking for, or hey, I'm thinking about a lesson in this area. Does anyone have anything that can help me? So this is where you're going to gather those resources that you might need to put this lesson together. Right now you've been gathering ideas, and this is where you kind of pull it all together. But the key to this is not letting any teaching guide dictate where you're going next. I know my district is very good at providing us with resources to use within our classroom, but I never let that be what dictates where I go next. I hope that makes sense. I do use it as a resource, and I'll use it as a guide, and I might pull nuggets from that, but I'm not afraid to also pull from other resources or other areas to supplement or add to what my district has already provided me. The other thing that you want to start pulling together is maybe resources that the kids would be able to use. And this can happen at any grade level, even at kindergarten. If you find that your kids are, you know what, hey, I want to do a unit on bugs, you could go and create some big old tubs with lots of different books on bugs and let them pick which tools they want to use to learn more about bugs. You could even do this digitally. Say you're in a 4th or 5th grade classroom and you're doing a unit on earth science. Maybe what you're going to do is curate a bunch of videos you find on YouTube or National Geographic, or maybe you're going to go to find videos from other resources and put it all in, say, a Google slide with all these links that kids can go through and choose how they're going to consume the information they need to learn. What am I missing there, Jen? Did I miss something in that part?
No, just the fact that not only do we want to curate quality resources for our students, but we need to be teaching them how to curate their own resources as well. And as Shannon alluded to, this works kindergarten through, well, adult learners. We can all scaffold that, able to curate resources even for that littlest learner. So be keeping in mind, you don't keep all the power to yourself for resources, but you're that guide on the side of helping your students also find those great resources for their learning.
Yeah, and I know on an upcoming unit that I'm working on, it's still formulating in my brain. I haven't written anything down, but the way I envision it is to have I'm actually going to have all my students choose their topic based on their interest. I'm going to require that they have a book, and I'm going to help them with that by collecting books that I have in creating tubs, like I said, for the kindergartners. Again, mine are 3rd and 4th grade, so I'm going to have them pull those. But then I think one of their assignments while they're at home working, I'm going to have them go search the internet and find maybe one article or one video or find another resource in addition to the one I provide them in the classroom. So then they have multiple resources to use to learn what they need to.
All right. And we hope that as you're listening to this so far, that no matter how you are teaching right now, whether you are face to face, whether you are distance, or whether you're somewhere in between, that all of these guides and these suggestions that we are sharing with you today work no matter what your teaching situation is. It's all about good teaching. It's not about what platform you're in right now, but it's just good teaching and learning. Yeah. So with that being said, you're going to head back into the chat again. Yay. And we want you to share, where do you go on your resource scavenger hunt to find those really rich, great resources? Do you have a great website, a link, some go-to videos? If you've got them, share those links over in the chat with us as well. So we're going to be quiet once again. Head on over to the chat.
Nice. I'm excited for this part. I always look forward to finding new resources.
All right, here we go. So we're on step 4 already, consistent structures, and we are already at step 4. We haven't even gotten into the learning with students yet. So this consistent structures, we are now needing to create very clear, very consistent pathways for our students to learn from. Clear, consistent pathways along with some wayfinding strategies. So let's think about a clear and consistent pathway as a road. It's the road that these students are going to travel down to learn whatever it is that you're doing in your classroom. And the wayfinding strategies are all of the signs, symbols, pieces that help them find their way. So think about if you go into an airport in a foreign country, what are you doing? You are looking for those universal symbols that help you to know where to go. Students need these too. And these clear and consistent pathways aren't just for distance learning. The power of creating a clear and consistent pathway for your students, no matter where they are, really lets students take control of their learning. It empowers them to follow their own path and to be able to engage in a way that is meaningful and comfortable for them. But we need to make sure that it is clear and consistent and that they can easily follow it. So we're going to go into looking at a few examples. And we have 3 different examples here that range from 2nd grade up through high school. And these examples all show ways that we can embed choice in these clear and consistent pathways. So this first pathway that we are going to take a look at is a 2nd grade lesson on maps. And what I want you to pay attention to in this is that the first few slides take students through their consumption, their learning. It's teaching them how to navigate all of this. So we're going to teach them how to do some things within Google Maps. And then we're going to ask them to do something with that. And then you're going to take them through some more learning until they get down to the end here. And now they're ready for their own adventure. Once students have gone through the training, they get to click on this. And this is what's so powerful. They are given choice. They have choice to go explore something that looks interesting to them. Instantly, that kiddo who's really interested in space has that ability to go look in space versus someone who might want to go adventure in New York. But students have choice, and then they get to share their observations however they want, which is really powerful as well. So very clear pathway of how students are going to work through that. This next example actually comes from Shannon, and this is with, at that point in time, it was with a 4th and 5th grade group of kiddos, and this was for fully remote learning. But I want you to put on your teacher lens as you look at some of the pieces of this learning, and what could you do with this in hybrid, or what could you do with this in face-to-face learning? So let's take a look at a few of the really important pieces she has here. A video that starts off her learning for the week. So her students, because they were distance, can see her and get to know her. We have buttons down here along the bottom and that helpful wayfinding icon that says, hey, click. When students move on to this second slide, they can access any of their learning simply by clicking one of these buttons. They have a sample schedule and a to-do list, some important reminders. On the left-hand side, it takes students to other places as well that they can click on and easily get to. But what I want you to really see is if we click on this reading and writing, notice this is a green button. Instantly within this same slideshow, it's going to take us to a slide. Notice that the coloring on these slides is done in green, the same color that button was. So students know, and if you look along the side over here, students know if they're in the green, they are in reading and writing. She has put in everything that they need to do, their targets, she's got in their learning, and finally, how are they going to apply what they've learned? And look, there's choice. Her students have choice on how they want to go. Now, do they have an infinite number of choices? No, that's not what choice is about. It's about feeling empowered and you getting to make a choice. Having a choice between 2 things is still a choice. Shannon, tell us more about your amazing
Well, that's what
pathway
I'm
here.
saying. When I think about choice for my kids, I have to remember they're only 10 years old and they're navigating, in this instance, they were navigating distance learning. So I knew that was an obstacle. So I wanted to give them choice, but I want to also make it manageable and not overwhelming. So giving them 3 choices. So basically for this lesson, what they would do is click on that Washington State regions, and there's slides in there that talks about all of the regions of Washington. And then the second part is they get to choose which question they want to answer. And what I love about that is it naturally scaffolds my instruction and differentiates for those kiddos who need it. They get to choose, when they get to choose the question that fits their learning style and who they are as a learner, then it's a natural differentiation. You know, you might have a kiddo go, yeah, I don't really understand what that one question means, so I'm going to go on to another one. Or, hey, this one seems like a challenge. I want that challenge. And so I'm going to, you know what, I'm going to go do some more research. I know Mrs. Cunningham covered it, but hey, I might want to go find some more research. So you're naturally differentiating when you provide that choice.
And when you'll have access to these through our slideshow, so you can click on this and go poke around in it. What you're going to notice is this is really long. It's big, but keep in mind that this is over a week's worth of learning. And Shannon and her fellow teammates really worked collaboratively together to create learning for all students. So Shannon was no longer an island by herself, yet she and her team worked together. One took over reading, writing, one did math, one did science, social studies. They really worked together as a collaborative team and really shared that load. So that heavy burden is shared across the shoulders of multiple teachers, creating some amazing learning opportunities. And because it's set up so clearly, students are able to easily navigate through this and be independent, whether they're at home engaging in this or in the classroom. All right, and then our final example that we want to show you comes from a high school classroom. This is a colleague of ours at Enumclaw High School. And this is a choice board that he created for one of his high school classes. And what I really love about this, if you take a look at the left side of his slide here, gives them a little background information, tells them explicitly what they need to do. And what is really great about this is he has set it up so they get to choose what medium do they like to learn from. So they have to go one item under social, one under economic, and one under political, but they can choose, do I want to learn through a video or a reading or a research? And when you give kids that ability to choose, even though they only have to choose one under here, how often when we're given a choice for something, do we only click one thing? We're going to dip into multiple things. So when you give your kids choice, they're truly not sticking in the lane of only one thing, but they are naturally, because they are curious, they're going to dip into several things and at least have skimmed and scanned all of those other ideas that you have presented them with, so that they then have control over where they want to dive deeper.
Mm-hmm. And I love the way he's set that up, just because kids have that opportunity, like you said, to choose what they're digging into their own passions. They don't have a choice whether or not to learn about Vietnam. That is the topic that they have to cover, but they have a choice in the path that they're going to take to learn that, and they can personalize that for themselves.
And in Enumclaw, we actually gave all of our teachers a pathway template where they could modify, edit, make it their own, but it was a place to start so that they could start creating these pathways for students. If you're needing a place to start, there are lots of places under here for Pathway of Learning. When you click that link, it'll take you to Slides Mania. If you look in Slides Mania, they've got tons of pathway templates that you can start using and just plop in your information, your content, what you want your students doing. So don't get stuck because you're not sure where to get started. There's lots of opportunities and lots of things out there for you to get started on creating a pathway. And then once you have your pathway created, you can use that same pathway over and over and over again. And the power of that is that students are now familiar with how to navigate that pathway. They know how to follow their learning road.
Mhm. Yeah. And I remember that when we first started with the module, the first week was a little wonky because we had to teach them how to navigate it. But as the weeks went on and we used the exact same template, those questions were alleviated and they were able to do most of it independently.
Yeah, it's
All
powerful.
right. Yeah, it was cool, a cool experience. Now, if you'll notice, we are towards the end of step 4, and this is where we start making the decisions about what kind of tools we're going to use to implement this learning. You'll notice in tools, we're talking about things like computers or iPads, or maybe you're in a science class and you need to decide whether you're going to use what are they? The
Microscopes.
microscopes, yeah. Microscopes, or those tools that you're going to use. I don't teach that science part, but anyway, so this is where you're going to pick out your tools. Often what I see teachers doing is starting with their tools at the beginning of the lesson, and that's not the best method for creating these engaging lessons. You want to really focus more on the content of your lesson, the choice that you're going to provide them, the pathway, and then think about what tools you're going to use to get them to learn that, the content that you want them to learn. So again, your tools can be a variety of things. It can be computers, digital, non-digital. Maybe it's, paper, pencil. Maybe they're going to create a poster. But that's when you decide what tools you need, not at the beginning of your lesson.
And remember, that's the beauty of blended learning. We're blending those digital and non-digital opportunities together for students to really be impactful and really elevate their learning. So,
I'm
what's
going to say one more thing, sorry. The other mistake, or the other thing I see teachers do a lot, just because it's digital does not mean it's engaging. A worksheet is just as boring when you put it on the computer as when you have it in front of them. So just because you take that worksheet and scan it into a computer, you're like, oh, now this is going to be more engaging. That's not the case. You really have to be mindful and thoughtful of how you use the digital world. Sorry, I wanted to make sure I get that point in there.
That's perfect clarification, because it's true. We think technology is automatically going to make something more engaging, but if a worksheet's boring, it's boring whether it's on a screen or whether it's on your desk. So be thoughtful in the use of technology, or remember, it's all about those engaging activities,
Yes.
digital or non-digital.
Mhm.
So now we want you to really dive in and think about, what's your favorite tool that supports your pathway of learning? So it's going to make you dig a little deeper on this question, because you're going to have to think about, what is your pathway? And maybe if you don't have one, what do you want your pathway to be? And what tools could you use to support that pathway? All right, 1 minute in the chat. All right, thank you once again for participating over in the chat. All right, Shannon.
All right, we have made it to step 5. And this is where we become reflective of our process, or this is where we can also gather or give feedback. So the question for this one, remember at the beginning of our presentation, step 1 was that guiding question or theme. So now that we're at step 5, we want to reflect back and say, all right, how do I know if my students have met the outcome or the goal that I set for this lesson? What are some ways that I can get feedback from them? And how can I give them feedback? Now, we want to make sure that throughout the learning process, kids have the opportunity to get feedback frequently throughout it. If the only time kids get feedback is at the very end when you attach a grade to that, it kind of shuts down the learning process. Where I'm a believer in giving kids feedback consistently throughout the process. That way, by the time all of my kids get to the end of the project, they've all been successful because they've had feedback to get them to that desired outcome. The goal should be to have 100% of your kids reach the goal by the end. And we do that through feedback. Now, that feedback doesn't always have to come from me. That feedback can come from a peer. You can partner kids up. You can have them share what they've learned so far. You can teach those protocols that they'll need in order to give that constructive feedback back to their peers. They can also do self-reflection. Maybe it's a checklist. The other day, that's what I did with my kids is we sat down and we developed a checklist for ourselves that they were going to use to monitor whether or not they were revising and editing their writing the way they wanted to. So it can be, again, it can be feedback from you, it can be feedback from a peer, and it can also be feedback from themselves. The other cool thing at this point of the process is this is an opportunity for you to hear what kids have learned. And you don't have to do that on paper and pencil every single time. You can elicit some technology. You can maybe have them record a video that shows exactly what they learned. Or you can even do, for me, in either giving or getting feedback, one of my new favorite tools is called Mote, where I don't have to be in the video, but they can still hear my voice, which especially in distance learning, I found very valuable because again, hearing my voice connects me with those kids when we can't be side to side or side by side, sorry. So you definitely want to use those digital tools. And you can use them at any, like we've said before, this is good at any mode of teaching, but especially if you're in a distance experience, the more they can see your face and hear your voice, the more you're going to connect with them. And then as we know, those relationships really matter in elevating kiddos and helping them grow.
And one thing I love to do is using video. So even when you are in a face-to-face, bringing a kid over, having them by you with your computer, looking over some of their work, but you are videoing what your conversation is with this student and the feedback. Because how often does a student come sit with us? They tune us out. We're giving them great feedback, but they might or might be listening, or they forget what we've said. But when we video it with them, they have a copy of that. You share it right with them. They have a copy. They can go listen to it over and over again. When they're working at home, when you're not there, they can access your thinking, their thinking, and what their next goals or steps would be in that evaluative process.
And one of the things I found valuable in hybrid teaching is that I would work with a kiddo, have a one-on-one conference with them here in the classroom. We'd talk about their writing. And what I did is I digitally recorded that conference so that then I emailed it to them. So when they went home the next day to work by themselves on that piece of writing, they could refer back to the video and the conference that we had to remember what it is I said to them in that conference or what we talked about during that conference. So definitely utilize that technology in order to help you get that feedback to students.
All right.
All right. Is this me or you? Is this me? So what we want to know in the chat one more time, we're going to have you go in there. We're going to give you 1 minute and we want to know, how do you provide feedback through the process? Or what are some ways that you like to have students give self-assess themselves? That seems like a redundant sentence, but how do students self-assess? Go ahead and put all that in the chat for me, please.
All right.
Thank you so much for all of your thoughts and ideas in the chat. It just makes this job so much more fun.
It does.
Yeah.
All right. So finally, we've made it through all 5 steps. 5 simple steps, right? Okay, maybe they're not so simple, but they are really impactful. And if you can start thinking about these steps as you're creating your learning for your students, you're going to find that they're going to be much more engaged. You're going to be much more engaged, and the level and the elevation of your learning in your classroom is just, it's really going to elevate, and it's going to be just so impactful. So quick review. Step 1, get that guiding question, that enduring learning. What do you want the kids to know? Step 2, what are your goals? What do you want kids to consume and produce? And how are you allowing choice in both of those? Step 3, get your resources. You curate, your students curate. Step 4, that consistent pathway, that consistent structure, and the tools that students are going to use along that pathway. And finally, step 5, your outcomes. How are you giving feedback, that process over product? So one last time, we're going to have you jump into the chat. I promise. Well, it might not be the last time, but the last thing we want you to think about, what has resonated with you most about this process, or what has validated your current thinking? So what has resonated with you most, or what has validated your current thinking? One last minute, here we go. All right.
All right, you guys.
Now it's time for your next great idea. It's time for you to take these 5 steps and implement them into what you are doing.
All right, Jen and I would just want to thank you for taking the time to hang out with us for the last hour. We really appreciate all the comments and things that you put into the chat. And I'm excited to take some of those things that you put in there and implement it into my own teaching practice. So again, thank you for being here. We really appreciate you. All right, now if you'll stick around for a few minutes, Jen and I will hang out in the chat and answer any more questions that you might have.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Make sure to check out our resources at bit.ly/Shan and Jen.